From alcohol overuse to moderate use, no more shame and blame. Is your own alcohol use on your mind a lot? Since almost everyone who enjoys alcohol has likely had a binge, how do we manage that? How do we know how much is too much? And how do we regain control when we think we've lost it? In this special 12-part series, confidence coach Susan Axelrod interviews alcohol moderation expert Dr. Michele Perron. This series begins with the question, why are we having this conversation now? And it wraps up with a burning question for you to consider. For your own alcohol use practice, what will your path be? This special series is sponsored by Axelrod Confidence Coaching. Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 8 of this special series. I want to ask you, did you listen to episode 7? It was a good one. We reviewed all the challenges from the first 6 episodes, and then Michele hit us with this challenge from last week, from that episode. What is my goal when I drink? And in the episode, you're going to hear me say, what do you mean? What's my goal? And so that was a very interesting conversation that we had. And boy, I've been thinking about it myself as I keep this topic on my mind. So I'm delighted to be introducing my friend and my special guest in this special series, Dr. Michele Perron. Michele has 17 years of professional experience working at all levels of addiction care, from inpatient, outpatient, extended care, and telehealth to online moderation coaching services. Hello, Michele. Welcome back.
Hello. It's so nice to be back. I'm excited about today's topic because it puts it in a contextual picture. Like, where do we fit in as individuals into the bigger picture of alcohol use? And I think it's useful because it's a microcosm and a macrocosm. And so I don't think the conversation is complete without talking about where it fits into our world.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what we've been doing here. We were just talking before we got started formally here about some of the things I've learned and what really has stuck with me. One of the things was really having me understand the words and think, how is my liver processing the alcohol that I am drinking? If I have one drink, it's no problem. But once I get into 3 or 4 drinks in a night, can the liver process that? If I'm, having a ball on the weekend and I'm downing them, can my liver process 7 to 8 drinks? Mm-hmm. Also, last week's challenge was interesting for me when you said that the challenge is, what is my goal when I drink? And so I've really thought about that. As you know, I am alcohol free at this time, but I'm thinking about everyone who might be watching this or listening to this or sharing these episodes. And I really did like the idea that you've elevated. Today, we're going to be talking about drinking culture and context, but you've elevated it to something from a mindless task, right? You have water, you take a drink, it's there, you have wine, whatever you have, you put down one beer, you open the next, to creating a conscious awareness of having a goal from my drinking. So let's get into this week's conversation, the drinking culture. Let her rip.
Yeah. Okay. So I looked up and, have studied over the years and just look up newest statistics about drinking culture. I've noticed that I live in Wisconsin. It's a big cheese world, right? And football and all that. And I've noticed that we have normalized as a culture heavy drinking in the US, but also in North America in general. In Canada, they have normalized heavy drinking, but it's not exactly like your neighbor or yourself or your friends are heavy drinking all the time. As a whole, if we look at the bigger picture, us as a group, we have sort of a dichotomous relationship with alcohol. When we drink, we tend to binge, which is 4 for women or 5 or more for men, right? 4 or more for women, 5 or more for men, which is binging. And then based on whatever may or may not have happened during that binge, we may take some time off. So we go from all or nothing, black and white, which brings us back to the impossible goal. If we treat it like we can't control it, and we have no plan, no forethought in controlling it, then we do binge because we have not set the goal. We'll set a goal for money, for the job, for our marriage, for our money, for everything, what we're going to eat, weight we're going to lose, how many miles we're going to run today. But we don't set a goal with alcohol, which it's an important goal we ought to set, I think. So when we set that goal, then we're intentionally saying, am I drinking tonight to just obliterate my life because I'm upset? Maybe I can think again, have a new second thought, right? Or am I drinking because it's my birthday and I'd like to relax with my friends and get some good selfies and videos and good memories from the night? The goal varies, right? And so if the more thought we can put, the more forethought we put into it, the more care that shows for ourselves, the more self-care. Because what good is it if you're trying to lose weight and you just have what I call the policy of let her rip drinking? Like, I'm just going to start and see where the night takes me, but I'm not going to eat those carbs tomorrow. It makes no sense, right?
Right. I just want to pause for a moment. And you said it again, you're talking about it again. And I think it's very helpful to call on the attention now to plan or have forethought about it. And I wrote down, one of the reasons is you're having forethought about your drinking, you're planning your alcohol use in part to protect the liver, as we just said, but also to really be tuned in and in charge of yourself. And there's so many circumstances where, like you say, I'm just going and drinking, and you haven't planned it, you haven't had any forethought about it. And then what happens as a result? And sometimes negative things happen. Now you're talking about the idea, well, you're dieting during the week and binging alcohol calories on the weekend. What kind of planning is there for that? So I'm with you.
So we want to be in alignment. So when you lose the ability to choose, which is like, I'm just going to start and it'll stop when it stops on its own, somehow on its own, right? We also lose the ability to control. So when we lose the ability to choose, we lose the ability to control. So I'm all about, in what I do with clients, is helping them rediscover the ability to choose and how to implement that throughout their lives until it becomes their new normal, because choosing is the key. And when we lose the ability to choose, we lose that ability to control. And I think, and that comes so much earlier in the process than, the chronic over drinking that happens. Choice happens far sooner in the cascade than anything else. So if you can nip it in the bud, so to speak, if you can maintain your sense of choice early on, you're going to be far better off, or look to regain it as quickly as possible. You're also going to be better off.
Yeah, I'm looking in my folder at my notes at some of the other challenges. And I was thinking of this is about the track your drinking was one of the challenges, and planning with forethought your drinking. Michele, it comes up for me. That's not really that fun. I get it. Okay. I'm talking to anybody out there who's saying, well, that's not fun. And I get it. That's kind of the way I am with potato chips. And it's hard for me. It's not that fun to pour them into a little bowl. And I get that. But the ramifications are extreme. Yeah. And you said
there can be a difference between life and death. That's why it's so important. And furthermore, the not fun part doesn't last forever. Eventually, as you practice this and your body gets accustomed to the new norm, it becomes more automatic. And it's not, I have to, do every single detail on my way, right?
Yes, and it's true, because I'm here to say, I made a choice. I did choose. I wasn't in overuse. I made a choice to be an ally. And then I worked at it. I just stopped myself, but I was tuned in. I was aware, and it became easier. Yes. Now I even spoke with you. Now, if I go to an occasion, I'm not thinking, I don't have to plan my drinking because I'm not drinking, because I have more money. I have less weight. I'm more clear. I'm happy,
and
I can drive home, etc. But that was interesting what just happened there. You said the let her rip culture the drinking culture, the macro conversation. And I was the one who said, well, it's not that much fun. And then you said, that part doesn't last forever. Life is more fun when you maintain your ability to choose. I want to ask you an important question, even though it's a hard question, I am going to ask it. In your experience, with your expertise, are there people who are lying to themselves about whether or not they can still choose, or kidding themselves? I mean, you're talking about choosing before you lose that ability, if you're honest with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would have to say most of my clients believe that they are more in control than they think they are, right? And the idea that I can stop anytime, they say that, but they've never tried that. Those who have tried that find their way to me because they realize that I've tried doing it on my own and I can't. It's too hard. I don't know how to make this easier or make it work. And so, yes, I would have to say that almost everyone I've ever worked with has that delusion, and returning them back. And so that's why it's a process. If I could just wave my magic wand and make that a possibility from day one, that would be great. But the most I can do, as any counseling or coaching can do, is plant a seed, and then your client, it works, and you keep watering that seed over time, and it finally sprouts and it becomes part of their everyday. So it's that repetition and that working together and laughing together and crying together and, solving problems and solving conundrums and reviewing times when I didn't do it as well as I thought I could, and reviewing, everything from what you're putting in your body, maybe your medications or your supplements or your exercise, the whole spectrum of all the things that go into one's life to make it happy and easy and guilt-free and less chaos and drama and all of that. So it's the whole picture, but this is one of the things, and I think it's a fundamental thing, that when you feel you've lost your ability to choose how much you're going to drink, then you're probably in trouble.
Right.
And that might be a cue for some people.
Right, exactly. And we're here to say, over and over, part of what we're doing here and what you're offering us here is you don't have to stop forever. There are tools, there's resources, there's strategies where you can bring yourself back into your body, your ability to choose. And that's why I'm keep reflecting back, like, what do you mean track your drinking? What do you mean give it forethought? What do you mean plan it? What do you mean?
To slow down the process. We live in such an instant world, instant food, instant entertainment, instant TV, instant everything. And so we think in instant we can turn this around. And it's just everything so fast. We need to, in order to gain insight, we need to slow things down so we can have a little reflection and go, okay, now wait a minute, what am I really doing? Am I telling myself the truth? How do I really feel? I have had more clients tell me they do not, when they slow it all down and start choosing and consuming more slowly even, they say they don't even like the taste of wine. That is such a common thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Or if they slow it down and they're tuning in, then there's also, I don't like the way I feel when I drink.
Yeah.
But if you're not, if you're just going, you said you're just, am I drinking? I'm just going to drink and see what happens. That's what I wrote down.
Yes.
That's what you said. And let her rip. And then, but I do get, it's hard to slow it down.
It's hard because we've been trained otherwise, right? So in the US, 54% of adults over 15, people over 15, drink regularly. And in Canada, it's a little bit higher. It's 69%. So how do we get to that drinkiness, binging, off and on relationship? We learn that. It's handed down. Basically, you may have observed your family of origin, your grandparents, your parents, your older siblings drinking. And then when you got initiated into it, Typically, unfortunately, people get initiated into drinking around 12 years old to 15. I've met people in as little as 5, unfortunately, in my work. But thank goodness that's not the norm. So we get trained, and then we get initiated when we have our first experience with it. And that might involve also, not only the altered state, because typically people will get sick the first time they try it. They may over drink and then end up throwing up, but we still go back to it because of the learning rules. If it feels good, do it. If it doesn't feel good, do it. Don't do it right away, but do it again and try it again. So we practice to be able to increase our tolerance of this toxin. But initially, when we throw up, the body's saying this is poison, we should listen. But we don't, because the norm is to heavy drink. So
in high school, it's classic. It's
classic.
constant.
It's the initiation of high school. It's also higher use in college. It's a college culture as well. And it's also a wedding culture. People drink, and most certainly a sports culture event, right? So if you're into any of those things or have a lot of friends getting married, you're likely going to be in the vicinity of people who are drinking more. So we've seen a trend towards people starting to change what they're drinking. And so I came across something called a zebra striper. And this was I guess maybe a visual idea of people who are trying to learn to moderate are actually alternating an alcoholic drink with a non-alcoholic drink with an alcohol, non-alcohol. So they're giving it a name called zebra striper. I've talked about this for years without that name. Other people use the 1-2-3 rule. So that would be 1 drink per hour, no more than 2, or excuse me, 1 drink per hour, not more than 2 hours, not more than a total of 3 all day long. And so that's a way to reduce your use as well. So there are little tips and tricks. I have a booklet where I have 85 of those types of ideas to help people reduce their use. So there are lots of ways to do that. But the other thing I want to bring up when we talk about what we're drinking is a trend towards drinks that contain cannabis. And the reason drinks that contain cannabis, they come in a can, they're in liquor stores, they're even in our grocery stores here in Wisconsin, but they contain THC. So you would drink 1 or 2 or maybe 3 if you could manage it. And they say that people think they're using it because it's a natural alternative, mostly because it avoids a hangover the next morning for most people. However, people can get just as sick and vomit when they use them as well. But they think it's a healthy alternative. And it's not that, because as I continued my research, the side effects are almost exactly the same as when drinking alcohol, with impaired memory. Let's see, I need to put my extra pair of glasses on. It's a little bit small. Slowed reaction times as when you are driving, and lack of coordination. And then you get the munchies, which you don't generally get with alcohol. And then dry mouth, red eyes, and you have GI and throwing up. Well, the side effects sound to me to be roughly like drinking alcohol, right?
This is coming to me out of left field. This wasn't in the notes. And are you talking about kratom?
Nope, I'm talking about drinks that now contain.
These drinks that you're referring to that contain cannabis, are they alcohol with cannabis, or they're just drinks cannabis that have cannabis
in a can, usually in the beer section, and they're usually effervescent. They're carbonated.
Okay. This is brand new for me. Drinks that contain cannabis have these side effects. People think, well, cannabis is a natural, it's a weed, it's a plant, so it's healthier for me. But these are all processed. So
these are all processed, and
there's no
they
plant.
Some contain very small amounts of that. Of THC. However, your side effects are much like over drinking as well. And they're being used by millennials and Gen Zs, and with this notion that I'm doing something healthy for myself. But I can tell you from my studies that there are over 400 different different cannabinoids that we've in cannabis, and part of the components, and we have identified about 86 of those, and we know some of them are very dangerous, like the delta 8 and 9, which can cause psychosis. But also it can increase your risk for heart attacks, gives you anxiety, paranoia, panic disorder, and hyperemesis. So there's a condition that if you use it on the regular and don't stop, you can develop a condition, the syndrome, where you're throwing up every day, all the time. It's hyperemesis. So that's not good.
I want to say here, we were talking about the fact that there are studies today. It's the year 2026. Somebody may be watching this in 2030. So I want to say clearly it's the year 2026, that there are studies showing that some Gen Zers are not drinking alcohol, and that there's a reduced use by some Gen Zers, let's say, and that there is a decrease overall for the first time in generations. But now I'm wondering if some of those same people who are in quotation marks not drinking, and therefore the numbers are going down, are now drinking drinks with cannabis in them, and we haven't even started.
It isn't an equal proportion, but it is. The cannabis drink consumers are filling some of that gap of non-drinkers because of this notion that it's healthy and it's fine. I can tell you, I've had clients and friends happily using gummies for bed and unfortunately having a psychotic break, having to be hospitalized for a month, and coming out not being the same. One of the people that I know, of the people I've experienced, one of them decided to go and start speaking to youth, saying it's not as innocuous as you think it is. And once you develop a psychosis, you can also, if it doesn't resolve, you can also go into getting schizophrenia. So there are a lot of reports and studies looking at the schizophrenia and if it can be reversed, and sometimes it can't. So that's a lifelong debilitating problem. So switching out alcohol with the THC drinks are not a good idea, in my opinion. That's just
right. So let's allow that soundbite to sit here for a minute. If you think that you're doing well because you're not drinking alcohol anymore, and you have made a choice, we were talking about choosing earlier, to drink drinks that contain cannabis, we want to encourage you to look at the side effects, tune in to that choice that you've made, and face the reality that may come, even though I guess you did a good job not drinking alcohol, making that choice, but you're still making a choice to ingest a substance. Let's leave that out there for now, unless it comes back in your other notes. But I did want to go back to a point that you made that I think I really don't want to lose the thread of this, and that is 54% over the age of 15. They call them adults. 15-year-olds are not adults. 15-year-olds are children. Okay, maybe by 16 you're driving, by 18 you sign up for war, by 21 you're voting, but that's 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. These are young people, children, drink alcohol. That's that. So that doesn't mean they overuse alcohol, but then you got into, well, there's the culture, the drinking culture of an initiation. You start drinking in high school, you vomit because it's poison and toxic to your system. And then you said, basically, you practice to raise your tolerance at 16, 17, let's say. I heard you say there's much younger kids, but especially you basically practice to raise your tolerance so you can be part of the drinking culture at the sports game or at a party when all the parents are out of town and so on. And you're basically training yourself to drink. Now,
to binge drink or be abstinent. We're back to the black and white, all or nothing thinking. You see, that's where that perpetuated, and then it becomes problematic, and binge abstinence becomes abstinence relapse. it carries into the impossible goal. So we're still in, roughly in the same place when we're binging and then stopping and binging and stopping and as our norm, right?
And
so
that
we
would
can
be
through
the
treatment that way as well. And we don't get anywhere because we're still in black and white thinking.
And that would be the example at hopefully a lower level in high school. You're not drinking during the weeks, but you go to a house party, you pregame at the high school football game or basketball game at night, and you walk in and you're inebriated at some level, or worse, probably much more in college, where you're studying all week and you're doing your thing and you're not drinking, during the week, but on the weekend, you really let her rip. You really let loose. You're at the fraternity house or the sorority house, or yeah, exactly, at the football game, right, where you're pre-gaming for hours in the morning until the afternoon football game, etc.
And blacking out usually when you get to a certain level of tolerance, and your body will still be animate because it's literally being possessed by something that isn't you. If you're blackout,
when you said blacking out, you didn't mean passing out. What
Correct.
You meant was blacking out from this overuse of alcohol, the binging of the alcohol, and then you don't remember what's happening. And in that stage, bad things can happen if you're in a fraternity house, right?
And you don't remember what happened. It can if you blackout drink, all sorts of things can happen. I've had clients, beautiful young women, who did wake up in someone's bed. They don't know who that person is. And that can be extremely dangerous, especially in this day and age. Blackout, if you have blackout drinking, all of my clients without fail, if they have blackout drinking, I usually recommend that they stop for a significant amount of time, which might be 6 months before they even consider moderation, because that means their liver is not living. It's overload, and it's allowed to overload the brain as well. So it turns off the consciousness. And that's what I mean when I say alcohol is different than other beverages. It brings with it that ability to turn off your brain, but animate your body. And that is biblically, what some people refer to, and even at the turn of the last century in the 1800s and 1900s, is a low-level possession. And as I watch people and their behavior and their stories that they tell me when they've heard what they did in blackout drinking, or who they dialed when they looked at their phone, or have to check their Facebook for who they insulted or why people are mad at them, that's because alcohol is playing with your body and causing that animation to continue without your consciousness on board.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. In my family, we had a little bit of drunk dialing going on, all in good fun. Oh, so-and-so drunk dialed so-and-so. And that was funny. It was funny. It was funny. It was funny.
Yeah.
And thank God, by the grace of God, that didn't turn into anything worse. But basically, that's what that is. You're drunk dialing, you're slurring your words and you don't remember, and then the other person tells you, what do you mean, you called me last night, you were out of it. And and so that's all in good fun, but we're talking about very serious ramifications. And this blackout, I want to call people in, I want to call people in to what we're talking about now, to what we're saying here. I'm sorry, Michele. This is hard for me. I'm having a little bit of an emotional reaction, because I feel that this conversation point is really affecting a lot of people. I want to slow it down a bit. I want to stay here for a second. And I want to invite people to ask themselves, has this ever happened to me? Has it ever happened that I drank and then I didn't remember? And so, Michele, if it happened one time, and it happened one time, oh gosh, I really lit one up at the football game, and it doesn't happen in a reoccurring way, or I'm deeply aware that's not a regular pattern for me. That's one thing, but it would appear to be in our conversation today, you're indicating if it happens more than once if it happened every time you binge drink on the weekends and you basically fall asleep at night and you vaguely don't recall very much what happened the night before. Oh yeah, I was wasted. That's the blackout drinking that you're talking about, right?
Yes. Yes. And I'm also talking about if you're over 50, over 60, and you have a long career of drinking and you've self-managed pretty good, not enough to end up, with a DWR, going to treatment, or, maybe someone's gotten angry with you and you've cut back for a while, but then you return. Like if you've been managing the binge abstinence routine like most Americans do, but you get into your 50s and 60s. I had a client who once was doing exactly that, and she was in moderation, and she worked with me for quite some time, and she was doing really well. And then she got a devastating news, and she drank. And she got up in the morning, and her husband was furious. And she said, "What are you furious about?" And he said, "Don't you remember?" And she looked at her watch and said, "I have to leave. I have an appointment to exercise with friends. So I'll talk to you later." So she felt her head, and she had a bump on her head. And she said, "Well, where did that come from? That's weird." And her husband was able to tell her as she was leaving the house that she fell down the stairs. And he almost had to call 911, and she had absolutely zero recollection. Well, it's one thing if you fall down the stairs and you're 35. It can still kill you. I've known 2 people in one family who died from falling down the stairs. However, if you're 50, 60, you have a difference in bone density. You have a difference in hormones and balance and muscle maintenance and muscle control. And just you start to lose muscle and gain fat, and you lose symmetry, and lots of things happen as you age. And if you're blackout drinking and you fall down the stairs and you don't remember, you are now at a risk of killing yourself inadvertently, or allowing alcohol to take your life by falling downstairs. Because many people, the number one cause of death from drinking is not car accidents, it's falling.
It's falling.
So it's falling. Some people fall off a ladder or trip on something in the yard and hit their head, or fall down the stairs. And so, or fall out of a boat, but it's falling, right? Drowning is not up there. Even car accidents.
Falling off a balcony.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's an important thing to say, well, as I get older, I need to drink less because my body can't process as quickly as it did before. My blood volume is less over 55, and I really start to have to pay attention to volume. And I can't binge one night and stop drinking for 2 weeks. That's not going to work.
Right. And also this really also in this piece of our conversation really calls in an entirely different attention to these ideas that you're tracking and planning, and that you're visualizing how will the drinking go. And you told us about the peak end experience, END. Yep. What's the peak end experience that I want to have? And then the planning, what's your goal from drinking? And so tuning in, and I've known many people into their 70s and then 80s who became alcoholics, basically, who weren't previously necessarily so. And I think it has to do with all these things that you're talking about. Of course, boredom and loneliness,
retirement, change of venue, change of lifestyle. Kids aren't living
right. And you just drink more. And I did note here something that I thought maybe we could check in with, and that was the story of the husband mad at the wife, and the wife's like, "What's your problem?" And then he said, "Don't you remember?" And so regarding you, if you're listening or watching this conversation, this would be another marker for you. We talked before about, can I choose? Am I choosing my drinking, or have I lost my ability to choose? And now I'm wondering if you hear ringing in your ears, don't you remember? Mm-hmm. If you hear ringing in your ears from your loved ones, what do you mean? Don't you remember? Don't you remember you called? Don't you remember you fell? Don't you remember what you said when you were drinking, or so on and so forth? That would be another marker for us to tune into.
Yes. And often when we're repeatedly accused of don't you remember, the default answer, just for people listening, is I'm too tired. I was so tired. I was half asleep, when in fact I'm not half asleep or tired. I was blacking out,
Right.
or on the way to passing out and sleeping on the couch every night.
That's right. That's right. So I'm looking at, first of all, this is deep shit. If you excuse me, Michelle, I just want to, really take a breath here. This really, excuse my French, but this really is heavy here. So I want to acknowledge that. I know that it is. This is important. This is life-changing stuff. This is life-saving stuff. And, it's heavy. I'm not apologizing for talking outright, overtly, in a deep, honest, real way about things that can change your life or save your life. But I can acknowledge that I could invite people to, take that breath in and out. Let's talk about the new way of pre-gaming, with food. I see something in the notes about this. How do you start a party now?
Yeah, so I like to call it preloading, and rather than pre-gaming, we're preloading, and that means we can reduce the effect alcohol has us from the get-go. And of course, in college, we learn that early, because don't eat before you go drinking, because you don't get your buzz. That might work when you're 20 something, but when you're 50 something, that's not going to work, or 40 something. You need to play the long game. You want to live longer, play the long game, protect your body, and help your liver do what it does best. And so preloading means I'm going to have a high protein fat snack before I touch a drop of alcohol. So I'm never going to drink on an empty stomach, especially if you're stimulated secondarily by your glutamate, because alcohol can cause that release. And some people who are low in blood sugar have this glutamate surge, and that's the reward. It may be secondary or even tertiary to the endorphin dopamine rush that you get. Then the third thing that happens is the increase in glutamate, and that's sometimes the thing for people with low blood sugar. So when you preload by eating protein and fat prior to going out, and or take a medication we're going to talk about next week, that helps your body stabilize the blood sugar and have enough calories on board for energy and processing to slow the absorption of alcohol from the very beginning.
What would these yummy high protein or high fat snacks be that you could intentionally bring in to your experience, because you're thinking, because you're tracking, because you're planning, and you want to go to a wedding, you want to go out for your anniversary and have a lovely night with a scotch or whatever. What are these high protein, high fat snacks?
Yeah, so they're really easy. Full fat dairy, like yogurt, that would be high protein, not the sugary kind, the plain kind, and then sweeten it and put maybe some berries in it. Blueberries are good antioxidants. So that would be one. You could also do cottage cheese. 2/3 of a cup of cottage cheese has protein. It's high fat. Some people like it with, a cling peach on there. I grew up eating it that way. Other people like it with ketchup. Some people just eat it plain with salt and pepper or everything bagel seasoning, but that would be a good one. Or the proverbial thing we give children is peanut butter on a log, right? With a couple of raisins on there for little ants. So that's a good snack. Or a piece of cheese and a half an apple, or even a hard-boiled egg, but you'd like to use maybe some of your own homemade mayonnaise, or some good avocado oil-based mayonnaise. So that would be high protein, high fat as well, and put that on a couple of crackers. Or one of my favorite things I had for lunch today is a can of sardines. They are the superfood for humans, with lots of minerals and calcium and protein and good oils, especially if they're in olive oil. So that a high quality one is really good.
So you pop open that can of sardines, you put it on bread or crackers or your plate. Do you eat it with a fork out of the can?
Yeah, you can put a little hot sauce. Sometimes I'll mix it with mayo and make it up like tuna on a cracker. Sometimes if they're smoked, I like the Polar brand. You can see the little fishies in the window. I love that. So then I'll use them that way and just put them on a cracker.
So
But
canned fish, that's a whole conversation of another. It's really
yes,
good
the
food,
smaller
but
fish, better.
right, but it's also high in sodium. But we're really looking for these. So basically, as we go back to, and I'm really, bringing this back to connect, the dots here of our conversations. If you want to. If you have a good reason to drink, one of the early challenges, what's a good reason to drink? If you have a good reason to drink, you're going to an event, this or that, you have a good reason to drink, you're meeting friends or whatever, and you are tracking, I'm going to go out that night. I know I'm going to, I want to have a couple of drinks, and that you already know that you want a peak end experience. I want to go out. I want to have a couple of drinks with my women friends or my bros or my family or my, brother I'm going to go hang out with. But you want to have a peak end experience. You don't want to have to give up your keys.
Yep.
That's embarrassing, right? Or God forbid anything worse. And then you know that the goal is I want to have a lovely night out. Then basically you're telling us preload with food. Pop a yogurt, even though it'd be better if it was plain with some honey or whatever. Get some berries in there, cottage cheese and fruit, PB, peanut butter on celery, cheese and apple. A lot of this is like stuff I eat now.
Yeah.
Hard-boiled egg, whatever. You don't have to have sardines if you don't want sardines. There's lots of options. So basically, preload with food to support your organs, your system, and then what happens?
The absorption of alcohol. It slows the rate at which you're absorbing it. So you're not going to get that huge rush. I know that's what you like. That was okay in your 20s. But when you're over 40, over 45, 50, 60, you don't want that because you want to be here tomorrow to enjoy another day. And this will be protective in nature.
I mean, honestly, at middle age and older, I don't know, it would be an interesting survey. Are you drinking for the high, or are you just drinking to enjoy a scotch, a margarita, a martini? That was my drink. And are you just drinking to enjoy it and you just want to do it in a well way, as opposed to for the high? And, one of our other episodes, we said something about you had, you might say, well, why do you drink? Because it's Tuesday. So slowing the absorption of the alcohol allows you to have a moderate experience with alcohol. Have a nice scotch with your friend or whatever. Have a nice glass of wine, and be okay at the other end of it. So let's get to the challenge this week.
This is one of my favorite challenges. I'm so glad we're to that point. I have seen it be a very, very powerful tool with my clients because they didn't realize, they have huge realizations. So your task in this challenge is to observe others at least one time at an event where there will be heavy drinking, but you don't drink. You're there to drink non-alcoholic beverages and watch everybody else and see what they do. I have had so many clients. One time I had a lady who was a fundraiser, and she would get everyone organized and they go out to dinner on Thursday nights and to plan their fundraising. And I gave her this challenge and she did it, and she came back and she said, I usually drink 8 or 10 drinks at those fundraisers. And she said, when I watched everybody, no one was drinking what I was drinking. Everyone was drinking 1 or 2. Some didn't even drink at all. And I had no idea that she was, head and neck ahead of everyone else with her volume. I had another person go to a wedding. A woman and a man went to a wedding together, and the wedding was happening at the same place the reception was happening. So they were watching the whole thing go down. And during that period, one of the guests was going to the bar 14 times in the space of an hour. And the gentleman said, that would have been me if you hadn't given me the task of observing. And so another man, a young businessman, has gone to bachelor parties and watched as his friends all become super intoxicated and going to bed early and hurting themselves and having to bring someone to the emergency room, and no one can drive or they have to call an Uber. And when he was present and not drinking, he was able to help others who had overdrank or get them back to their rooms or make sure they didn't have their car keys and all that sort of stuff.
Michele, for people who are watching this video, not just listening, I've been having a little smile come to my face that I've been trying to contain, because I know someone close to me who has a story that he wasn't drinking at a bachelor party, that he wasn't that close to people, and very funny things ensued. However, and it was, when he told me, I was just laughing so hard, but that's only because no one ended up dead.
Yeah.
From the things that were going on, something about a scooter. I don't remember the details now, but that's only because nobody ended up hurt. That's a different ending to that story.
Yes.
It was funny because nobody ended up in the emergency room.
Yeah.
And you know, by grace, you may have been to 4 bachelor parties where nothing happened, but we're here to tell you there's a 5th one where something bad did happen.
Yeah. It might be a minor injury when requiring stitches or a broken arm, nothing life-threatening, but certainly painful. But I find that for most of my clients, this can be a real eye-opener. And not that they choose to be a designated driver. You're just there kind of incognito watching everything go down and seeing who are the heavy drinkers. Is Bob or Larry the guy you usually try to keep up with, and you see him after 18 drinks? Yes, that can happen in, you know, the space of a few hours. And what does he look like, and what does he sound like? Is he really the shiniest, you know, bulb on the tree at that point? You know,
Right.
who is pacing your drink? And often people drink together, so they try to match one another's drinking. That's another bad idea, right? Drink what you can drink, not what Larry or Bob or
For
whoever's
sure,
drinking.
especially when you're younger, trying to keep up. For sure that happens. And also an older person, you were the one in one of our episodes who talked about a story where you had a father at going to a wedding. I think it was the father of the groom, and the son's buddies were his drinking buddies. And I said, well, that's a whole thing going on right there. An older person, as you've indicated today, the over 50 or 60 were able to self-manage for years, but things started going bad in that way. And if a 60 or a 55-year-old is trying to keep up with 25-year-olds or 30-year-olds, that's not a good equation.
Yeah. And medications get into all these equations as people go into their 60s and 70s. Like, there's medication and that has to be considered as well. And so there are a lot of things that people don't know about healthy aging. You know, the average person doesn't spend a lot of time researching, I don't think, how to live to be 90 years old, right? And so and there is also, I don't think, a whole lot of fantastic information, or, you know, doctors don't know what to do with centenarians. We don't even have much research on people who live over 100. And there will be more people in this country as we cross over the next 2030 who are centenarians than ever before. And we have a whole medical system that doesn't know what to do with these people because we've not seen people that old before. So,
right.
You know, it's adjusting. You want to be one of those people? There is a way if you take care of yourself and you plan, do the best you can. And then, you know, I guess the good Lord will decide how long you're going to live.
Exactly. I feel that if I can live 85 good, healthy, well, high functioning years, I'm good with that. Whatever's going to happen in the 15 years following that, I don't know, but I am tuned in very, very much to consciously, with commitment, choosing healthier personal health practices. Well, listen, Michele, we have to end here. This was a great conversation. I think we covered everything that you wanted to really talk about today. And this is deep stuff. And I want to acknowledge again to our listeners and viewers, I know this is deep stuff. we might have touched on things that were hard for you to hear. You might have turned us off, turned us back on. That's okay. We'll be here when you're ready. And we encourage you to share this conversation with someone else you know that it might resonate. But mostly take care of yourself. Tune into yourself. You be the one to stop drinking that night and observe the way it goes. We've talked about before how you don't even realize that you go to the bar even 4 times in an hour because it's an open bar. Let's get the bar before it closed. You walk back to the table with double drinks, right?
Yeah.
All right, Michele. Well, where can people find you?
My website is the easiest way to get me. That's www.drmichele with 1L Perron, PERRON.com. And that's the easiest way to get me. Or on LinkedIn, Michele D. Perron, PhD. Because there are 37, I guess. I now counted them up, Michele Perron.
Good. Okay. Well, we have in the show notes a direct link to you if people want to find you to work with you. Thank you, Michele. I'll see you next time around.
Thank you so much.